In an old house in Seattle, 38-year-old Eliza Clark finds a note from her late mother. Nathan is hiding the truth. Her husband, a successful lawyer, is acting suspiciously, and her 8-year-old daughter Sophie whispers about her father and grandmother's secrets. When the house becomes a trap, Eliza must uncover the betrayal to save herself and her daughter without breaking the law. Will she have the courage to overcome the lies? The old two-story house in a quiet Seattle suburb stood with a timeless charm, its ivy-covered brick facade hiding years of secrets. Inside, creaking floorboards whispered underfoot, and the worn grooves in the oak stair railings told stories of hands that had climbed them for decades. To Eliza Clark, 38, a museum curator with a sharp mind and a passion for art, these imperfections were treasures, grounding her in a home filled with history. Her long auburn hair was loosely tied back, and her hazel eyes, warm yet piercing, scanned the kitchen as she poured coffee into a ceramic mug. "Sophie, breakfast," Eliza called, her voice echoing through the house. Her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, bounded down the stairs, her dark curls bouncing. Sophie was a whirlwind of imagination, turning clouds into dragons and shadows into mysteries. "Mom, the sky's painting pictures again," she said, peering out the window, her nose pressed against the glass. Eliza smiled. "We'll chase those pictures later, okay? Your dad's got a big day." Nathan, her husband of 10 years, descended the stairs, adjusting his tie. At 40, Nathan was a polished defense attorney, tall and charismatic, with a smile that won over juries and clients alike. But lately, Eliza had noticed a distance in him, a subtle shift since her mother's death 6 months ago. He was often on calls behind closed doors, his tone hushed, his eyes avoiding hers. "Big case?" Eliza asked, setting a plate of toast on the table. Nathan nodded, sipping his coffee. "Could be a game changer. If this deal goes through, we're set for years." He ruffled Sophie's hair. "My little artist, when I'm back from this trip, I'll bring you something special. Promise." Sophie grinned, but Eliza felt a pang of unease. Nathan's promises had grown vague, his trips more frequent. Her mother's passing had left her with a substantial inheritance, yet Nathan seemed oddly eager for her to decide what to do with it. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the morning routine. As Nathan left for work, the house fell quiet. Eliza tidied the kitchen, her mind drifting to her mother's belongings, still unsorted in the attic. Sophie, meanwhile, rummaged through a storage closet, her curiosity insatiable. "Mom, look," she called, holding up a small, yellowed envelope. Eliza crossed the room, her heart skipping as she recognized her mother's handwriting. Asterisk Eliza, be careful. Nathan isn't who he seems. Asterisk. The words hit like a cold wave. Eliza's fingers trembled as she tucked the note into her pocket. "Where'd you find this, Soph?" "In a box with old books," Sophie said, her eyes wide. "Is it a secret?" Eliza forced a smile. "Just something Grandma wrote. Let's get you to school." But as she drove Sophie to class, the note burned in her mind. Her mother had always been cautious, but this warning felt different, urgent, personal. Had she known something about Nathan? Eliza's thoughts spiraled. She loved Nathan, trusted him. Yet the distance in his eyes, the late-night calls, the sudden interest in her inheritance, it all gnawed at her. Back home, Eliza sat at her desk, the note spread before her. She tried to focus on her work, planning an upcoming exhibit on Pacific Northwest artists, but her thoughts kept circling back. Nathan's mother, Ruth, a sharp-tongued real estate mogul, had never warmed to Eliza. Ruth's visits were laced with subtle jabs, her affection for Nathan bordering on obsession. Could she be involved? Eliza shook her head, chastising herself. She was letting a single note unravel her. Still, she couldn't ignore it. That evening, as Sophie drew at the kitchen table, Eliza asked, "Soph, have you noticed Dad acting different?" Sophie paused, her crayon hovering. "He talks to Grandma Ruth a lot. On the phone, when he thinks I'm asleep. They say weird stuff like it's almost time." Eliza's stomach tightened. "It's probably work stuff," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. After tucking Sophie into bed, she stood in the hallway, the house's creaks louder in the dark. The note's warning echoed. Nathan isn't who he seems. She needed answers, but confronting Nathan felt risky. What if she was wrong? What if she was right? As she climbed into bed, The weight of doubt settled over her. Tomorrow, she'd look closer, check Nathan's office, his emails, anything to quiet the growing fear. The old house seemed to hold its breath, its shadows deepening, as if it, too, knew secrets were about to unravel. The Seattle rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windows of the Clark family's old house, mirroring the unease pulsing through Eliza Clark's veins. Since finding her mother's cryptic note yesterday, the 38-year-old curator hadn't slept well. Nathan isn't who he seems. The words haunted her, weaving through her thoughts as she prepared breakfast. Her hazel eyes, usually bright with warmth, were shadowed with doubt as she glanced at her husband, Nathan, across the kitchen. Nathan, 40, adjusted his cufflinks, his polished exterior as impeccable as ever. His role as a defense attorney demanded charm, and he wore it like armor. But Eliza noticed the cracks, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes, the hurried phone calls he took in his locked office. "Big day today?" she asked, forcing a casual tone as she poured orange juice for their 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. "Always," Nathan replied, checking his watch. "This case could set us up for life, Eliza. No more scraping by." He winked at Sophie, who was doodling clouds on a napkin. "What do you want for my trip, kiddo?" "A new sketchbook." Sophie grinned. "One with dragons on it." But Eliza's stomach churned. Nathan's talk of setting them up felt rehearsed, and his upcoming business trip raised red flags. Last night, she'd glimpsed an email on his laptop. Flight details to San Francisco, not Chicago, where he claimed to be headed. As Nathan kissed Sophie's forehead and left, Eliza's mind raced. The note from her late mother, found by Sophie in an attic box, was now tucked in her desk drawer. Its warning gnawed at her, amplified by Sophie's innocent remark about Nathan's late-night calls with his mother, Ruth. Ruth, a wealthy real estate tycoon, had always viewed Eliza as unworthy of her son. Her visits were a parade of veiled insults, her devotion to Nathan almost suffocating. Could she be part of whatever Nathan was hiding? Eliza drove Sophie to school, the rain blurring the windshield like her thoughts. "Soph, you said Dad talks to Grandma Ruth a lot. What do they say?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Sophie fiddled with her backpack. "Stuff about money, and something about a plan to make everything perfect." Dad sounded sneaky. Her dark curls bounced as she turned to Eliza. "Is Dad okay?" "He's just busy," Eliza lied, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. Back home, she hesitated outside Nathan's office. The door was usually locked, but today it stood slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she slipped inside. The room smelled of leather and coffee, Nathan's desk a fortress of neatly stacked files. She rifled through drawers, finding nothing unusual until she spotted a folder labeled estate planning. Inside was a life insurance policy in her name, taken out 3 months ago, right after her mother's death. The payout was staggering, with Nathan listed as the sole beneficiary. Eliza's breath caught. Why hadn't he mentioned this? Her mother's inheritance, still untouched, flashed in her mind. Was Nathan after it? She snapped a photo of the document with her phone, her hands trembling. That evening, Nathan returned home late, his tie loosened. "Long day," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Over dinner, Eliza tested the waters. "How's the case going? You mentioned it's a big deal." Nathan's forward paws midair. "It's complicated, but it'll pay off." He changed the subject, asking Sophie about her art project. Eliza watched him, searching for the man she'd married, but all she saw was a stranger. After Sophie went to bed, Eliza confronted him. "Nathan, I found something today. A life insurance policy. Why didn't you tell me?" His eyes flickered, but he recovered quickly. "It's just a precaution, Eliza. For Sophie's future. You're overthinking it." His tone was smooth, but his fingers tapped the table, a nervous tick she hadn't noticed before. She wanted to believe him, but Sophie's words echoed. Sneaky. Later, alone in her study, Eliza Googled the insurance company. The policy was active, with a clause allowing immediate payout in case of accidental death. Her skin prickled. Was this about money? Her mother's estate? Or something darker? The phone rang, startling her. It was Ruth, her voice clipped. "Eliza, is Nathan there? I need to discuss his trip." "He's asleep." Eliza lied, testing her. "Anything I can help with?" A pause. "No, it's family business." Ruth hung up, but her tone carried a weight that chilled Eliza. She recalled Sophie's mention of a plan. Was Ruth orchestrating something with Nathan? The house's creaking floorboards seemed to mock her, as if urging her to dig deeper. Before bed, Eliza checked on Sophie, who was curled up with a stuffed dragon. "Mom," Sophie whispered, "I heard Dad on the phone again. He said, the insurance is set. We just need the right moment." "What does that mean?" Eliza's heart sank. She kissed Sophie's forehead. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Sleep tight." But as she closed the door, fear coiled tighter. Nathan's lies, Ruth's secrecy, the insurance policy, it all pointed to a betrayal she couldn't ignore. Tomorrow, she'd act. She'd search for more evidence. Maybe call her friend Linda, a lawyer, for advice. The old house, with its hidden corners and silent warnings, seemed to watch her, waiting for the truth to surface. The Seattle night was heavy with mist, cloaking the Clark family's old house in an eerie hush. Inside, Eliza Clark, 38, stood frozen in her bedroom, her heart racing. The life insurance policy she'd found in Nathan's office, naming him the beneficiary of a massive payout in her name, burned in her mind. Her mother's warning, Nathan isn't who he seems, felt like a prophecy. The creaking floorboards of the house seemed to whisper danger, and Eliza's hazel eyes darted to the door as she clutched her phone, the photo of the policy glowing on the screen. Sophie, her 8-year-old daughter, slept fitfully in the next room, unaware of the storm brewing. Earlier, Sophie's words had chilled Eliza. Nathan and his mother, Ruth, plotting something about the right moment for the insurance. Eliza had tried to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but the pieces, Nathan's secretive calls, Ruth's cold demeanor, the policy, fit together too neatly. She hadn't confronted Nathan again. His smooth denial last night had only deepened her distrust. Now, with him supposedly preparing for his business trip, Eliza felt time slipping away. Morning came, gray and damp. Nathan was already gone, his suitcase missing from the hall. "Back tomorrow," read his curt note on the fridge. Eliza dropped Sophie at school, scanning the street for anything unusual. A man in a dark jacket lingered across the road, his face obscured by a hood. He seemed to watch the house, but when Eliza looked again, he was gone. Her pulse quickened. Was she paranoid, or was someone watching? Back home, Eliza paced the kitchen, her mother's note in her pocket like a talisman. She called Linda, her friend and a sharp-minded attorney. "I need advice," Eliza said, her voice low. "I found something troubling. Can we meet?" Linda's tone was brisk. "Come by my office at noon. Bring whatever you've got." Eliza hung up, relieved but anxious. She needed proof before accusing Nathan of anything sinister. She returned to his office, the door still unlocked, a rare oversight. Rifling through his desk, she found a crumpled receipt for a hardware store purchase, industrial-grade locks, and a security system upgrade. Why would Nathan need those? The house's system was already state-of-the-art. As she searched, a faint chemical smell drifted through the air, sharp and unnatural. Eliza froze, her senses on edge. It was coming from downstairs. She crept to the kitchen, where the odor grew stronger, like paint thinner or gasoline. Her stomach lurched. She checked the windows, locked. The front door wouldn't budge, its keypad flashing an error. The security system, which Nathan controlled remotely, had sealed them in. Panic surged, but Eliza forced herself to think. She grabbed her phone to call 911, but the signal was dead. The Wi-Fi was down too. "Sophie," she whispered, realizing her daughter was still at school, safe for now. But Eliza wasn't. She ran upstairs, the chemical smell following her, and pounded on the attic door, hoping for an escape. It was bolted shut from the outside. The house felt like a cage. Eliza's mind raced to Sophie's stories about her grandmother's tales, whispers of a hidden passage in the basement, a relic from the house's days as a merchant's estate. Eliza had dismissed it as childish fantasy, but now it was her only hope. She descended to the basement, the air thick with the chemical stench. The bare bulb flickered as she scanned the damp walls, her fingers brushing cold stone. Behind a rusted shelving unit, she found it, a small, concealed door, its handle nearly invisible. Eliza's hands shook as she pulled it open, revealing a narrow, cobweb-choked tunnel. Dust swirled in the dim light, and the passage smelled of earth and decay. She hesitated, fear clawing at her. Was this a trap? But the chemical smell was growing, and a faint hum from the security system signaled it was still active, locking her in. She had no choice. Crawling through the tunnel, Eliza's knees scraped the rough floor. The passage sloped downward, twisting under the house. Her phone's flashlight cast jittery shadows, and her breath echoed in the confined space. After what felt like forever, she reached a wooden panel. Pushing it open, she emerged in the garage, coughing as fresh air hit her lungs. The chemical smell lingered, but she was out. In the garage, Eliza spotted something chilling. A canister of industrial solvent tucked behind Nathan's toolbox, its cap loose. Nearby lay a folded note in Ruth's precise handwriting. Asterisk timing is critical. The system locks at midnight. Ensure the solvent is spread evenly. Asterisk Eliza's blood ran cold. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. Nathan and Ruth were setting a trap, and she'd nearly been caught in it. She snapped photos of the note and canister, her hands trembling. Footsteps crunched outside the garage, and Eliza ducked behind a stack of boxes. Through a crack in the door, she saw the man in the dark jacket, now speaking into a phone. "It's set," he said, his voice low. "She's still inside." Eliza's heart pounded. They thought she was trapped. She waited until he moved away, then slipped out, sprinting to her car parked down the street. Her mind raced. She had to get Sophie, contact Linda, and alert the police, but without proof. Would they believe her? The note, the canister, the insurance policy, they were damning, but Nathan was a lawyer. He'd twist the truth. As she drove to Sophie's school, the old house loomed in her rearview mirror, its secrets no longer silent. Eliza gripped the wheel, determination hardening. She'd expose Nathan's betrayal, no matter the cost. The Seattle sky was a bruised gray, casting a pall over the city as Eliza Clark sped toward her friend Linda's law office. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as the images of the solvent canister and Ruth's incriminating note burned in her mind. The old house, now a distant silhouette, had nearly become her tomb. Eliza, 38, felt the weight of betrayal pressing against her chest, but she clung to one certainty. She had to protect Sophie and expose Nathan's plan. Her phone, buzzing with missed calls from an unknown number, lay silent. She didn't trust it wasn't Nathan or Ruth checking if she'd escaped. Sophie, her 8-year-old daughter, was safe at school, but Eliza's heart raced as she replayed the morning's terror. The chemical smell, the locked doors, the hidden passage that saved her. The evidence she'd photographed, the insurance policy, the solvent, Ruth's note, was now backed up on a USB drive in her purse. It was enough to prove Nathan and Ruth were plotting something sinister. But would the police believe her against a charismatic lawyer and his powerful mother? Eliza pulled into the parking lot of Linda's firm, a sleek glass building downtown. Linda, a no-nonsense attorney with a knack for unraveling complex cases, met her in the lobby. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Linda said, her sharp eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" In a quiet conference room, Eliza spilled everything. Her mother's warning note, Nathan's secretive calls, the life insurance policy, Sophie's overheard conversations, and a near-fatal trap in the house. She handed Linda the USB drive. "This is what I found in the garage. They were going to make it look like an accident." Linda's jaw tightened as she scrolled through the photos on her laptop. "This is serious, Eliza. The note from Ruth, the solvent, it screams premeditation. But Nathan's a lawyer. He'll claim it's circumstantial, maybe even frame it as your paranoia. We need to move fast and smart. What do I do?" Eliza's voice trembled. "Sophie's at school, but Nathan's supposed to be back tomorrow. What if he knows I got out?" Linda leaned forward. "First, we get Sophie somewhere safe. Then we take this to the police. I know a detective, Maria Torres, who's thorough and fair. She'll listen, but you'll need to be ready for pushback. Nathan's got connections." Eliza nodded, her resolve hardening. She picked up Sophie from school, the girl's dark curls bouncing as she climbed into the car. "Mom, is Dad okay?" Sophie asked, her wide eyes searching Eliza's face. "He's busy," Eliza said, forcing a smile. "We're going to stay with Aunt Linda tonight, okay?" Sophie nodded, clutching her dragon sketchbook, but her silence spoke volumes. She knew more than any child should. At Linda's apartment, Eliza sat Sophie down with a coloring book and called Detective Torres. The detective arrived within the hour, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Eliza's frayed nerves. Eliza recounted everything, showing the photos and explaining Sophie's role. My daughter overheard Nathan and his mother talking about making it look like an accident. She's only 8, but she's sharp. Torres raised an eyebrow. We'll need to talk to her, but gently. Kids can be reliable witnesses if they're not coached. She studied the evidence, her expression unreadable. This is compelling, but it's not airtight. The solvent and note suggest intent, but we need more to tie it to Nathan directly. Any financial irregularities? Unexplained purchases? Eliza hesitated. I haven't checked his accounts. He handles our finances. Torres nodded. We'll start there. If he's planning something this big, there's usually a money trail. She promised to launch a discreet investigation and advised Eliza to stay with Linda for safety. That evening, Ruth called. Her voice was syrupy, laced with menace. Eliza, I heard you're stirring up trouble. Let's talk this out, just us. I can make things easier for you. She dangled a vague offer of money, but Eliza's blood boiled. I don't want your money, Eliza snapped. I want the truth. She hung up, her hands shaking. Ruth's call confirmed her fears. They knew she'd escaped and were scrambling. By morning, Torres had news. We traced Nathan's financials. He's been siphoning money into an offshore account for months, and he's deep in debt, gambling, bad investments. Your mother's inheritance was his lifeline. We also found texts between him and Ruth discussing cleaning up loose ends. Eliza's stomach churned. What about the man I saw outside the house? We're looking into it, Torres said. Could be a hired hand. We've issued a warrant for Nathan's arrest. He didn't board his flight to San Francisco. Looks like he's hiding out locally. Eliza's relief was short-lived. She glanced at Sophie, who was quietly drawing. Sophie, honey, can you tell Detective Torres what you heard Dad say? Sophie's small voice was steady. Dad was on the phone with Grandma Ruth. He said, once it's done, the money's ours. It'll look like a gas leak. He didn't know I was listening. Her eyes met Eliza's, brave but haunted. Torres jotted notes. That's helpful, Sophie. You're very brave. To Eliza, she added, this strengthens the case. We'll bring them in. Hours later, Torres called with an update. Nathan had been arrested at a motel on the city's outskirts. A burner phone and fake ID in his possession. Ruth was detained at her waterfront condo, her composure crumbling as police searched her home. Eliza felt a mix of triumph and grief. The man she loved, the father of her child, had betrayed them for money. As night fell, Eliza tucked Sophie into bed at Linda's. Mom, are we safe now? Sophie asked, clutching her dragon plush. We're getting there, Eliza whispered, kissing her forehead. The fight wasn't over. Nathan and Ruth would face trial, and Eliza would need to testify. But for the first time, she felt the tide turning. The truth was her weapon, and she'd wield it to protect her daughter and reclaim their lives. The Seattle courtroom buzzed with tension, its polished wood and stern air amplifying Eliza Clark's racing heartbeat. The 38-year-old curator sat in the witness stand, her hazel eyes steady despite the weight of the past year. Across the room, her husband, Nathan, and his mother, Ruth, sat with their lawyers, their faces masks of defiance. The trial for their attempted scheme against Eliza and her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, had gripped the city, a tale of betrayal unraveled by a mother's resolve and a child's courage. Eliza gripped the edge of the stand, the memory of the locked house, the chemical smell, and the hidden passage fueling her determination. Months had passed since Nathan's arrest at a seedy motel and Ruth's detention at her lavish condo. The evidence Eliza had gathered, the life insurance policy, the solvent canister, Ruth's incriminating note, had been bolstered by Detective Torres' investigation. Nathan's financial ruin was laid bare. Years of gambling debts and failed investments, hidden behind his polished attorney facade. Texts between him and Ruth revealed a chilling plan to stage Eliza's death as a gas leak, claiming her mother's substantial inheritance. Sophie's testimony, delivered with a child's unflinching honesty, had become the case's cornerstone. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Karen Wells, called Eliza to testify. Ms. Clark, describe the night you escaped your home, she said. Eliza recounted the terror. The locked doors, the chemical stench, Sophie's whispered warning about a secret passage her grandmother had mentioned in stories. I found a canister of solvent in the garage, Eliza said, her voice clear. And a note from Ruth to Nathan, outlining the plan to trap me. The jury leaned forward, riveted. Nathan's lawyer tried to paint Eliza as paranoid, suggesting she'd misinterpreted innocent actions. Isn't it possible, he asked, that the solvent was for home repairs, and the note was about a business deal? Eliza held her ground. No, the security system was rigged to lock me in. The note said, timing is critical. The system locks at midnight. It was no coincidence. Then came Sophie's moment. The courtroom fell silent as the 8-year-old took the stand, her dark curls tied back, her dragon sketchbook clutched for comfort. Wells knelt to her level. Sophie, can you tell us what you heard your father say? Sophie's voice was small, but unwavering. Dad was on the phone with Grandma Ruth. He said, if Eliza's gone, the money's ours. It'll look like a gas leak. He was in his office, looking at house plans. I was outside the door. She paused, glancing at Eliza. I told Mom we had to run. The jury's eyes softened, some wiping tears. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, while Ruth's icy stare faltered. The defense tried to discredit Sophie, arguing her imagination had spun a story, but her precise details, dates, words, even Nathan's tone, were unshakable. She's 8, Wells told the jury. She had no reason to lie, only to protect her mother. The prosecution revealed more. Nathan's offshore accounts, drained by debts, Ruth's financial support to keep him afloat, and a hired hand, the man Eliza saw outside, who confessed to installing the rigged security system. Ruth, desperate to save herself, turned on Nathan. He was weak, she spat in her testimony. I only helped to protect my son's future. Eliza was holding him back. Her words backfired, exposing her as the scheme's mastermind. Nathan, in a last-ditch effort, claimed coercion. My mother controlled everything, he said, voice breaking. But the jury saw through his charm, now tarnished by greed. After a tense deliberation, the verdict came. Nathan was sentenced to 12 years for attempted murder and fraud. Ruth received 7 years for conspiracy. The courtroom exhaled, and Eliza felt a weight lift, though her heart ached for the family she'd lost. Outside, Eliza hugged Sophie tightly. You were so brave, she whispered. Sophie smiled, her eyes bright. Grandma's watching us, Mom. She told me we'd be okay. Eliza and Sophie moved to a modest home in a nearby town, purchased with part of her mother's inheritance. The new house lacked the old one's grandeur, but brimmed with warmth. Fresh paint, Sophie's drawings on the fridge, a garden where they planted sunflowers. Eliza returned to her museum work, curating an exhibit on women artists, and began plans for a foundation to support survivors of domestic betrayal. She named it Dawn's Light, after her mother, a beacon for those reclaiming their lives. Sophie thrived, her resilience shining. With help from a counselor, she made friends and won a school art contest. Her painting of 3 figures, hers Eliza, Sophie, and her late grandmother, displayed proudly at the museum. Grandma would love this, Sophie said, beaming. Nathan's prison letters arrived occasionally, pleading for forgiveness, but Eliza left them unopened. Ruth, isolated in her cell, grew bitter, her empire crumbling without her influence. The rift between mother and son deepened, their shared greed a final betrayal. Eliza focused on healing, grateful for Linda's legal guidance and Tora's diligence. The community rallied around them, offering support that restored Eliza's faith and kindness. On a crisp autumn evening, Eliza and Sophie sat on their porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Mom, are we a real family now? Sophie asked, sketching a dragon in her book. Eliza smiled, pulling her close. We always were. Sophomore family's about love and trust. We've got that, and no one can take it away. The stars emerged, and Eliza felt her mother's presence, a quiet assurance that they were safe. Their new beginning, forged through courage and truth, was just that, a dawn worth fighting for.